This is the Mules Rider Chronicles podcast, episode 14. It all began with Christmas. Hello out there, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Mules Rider Chronicles podcast. I am Craig Marlette, the Mules Rider, and I want to thank you for joining me for another glimpse into the sometimes crazy life I have lived as I traverse the planet in my search for true meaning. Today's story took place during the Christmas of 1990 on Llama Island in Hong Kong, where I lived with my wife and 4 children during our time as missionaries in Asia. Jolyn's mother had sent us a box of Christmas toys for the kids, which included about 100 miniature McDonald's holiday reindeer toys that played Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer whenever they decided to, without warning. See what happens when I discover how these musical reindeer bring out the Scrooge in me and take me to the edge of insanity as I wrestle with the whole concept of Christmas commercialism while being married to someone who would love nothing more than to be a kid again at Christmas. So hop on up here on my old mule and join me as we visit the past for this next story entitled, It All Began with Christmas. There's been a legend that has followed me throughout my life. I have concluded that it isn't true, but my mother and all of my siblings who claim they were there that day swear that it is a matter of Marlette historical record. I'll leave it to you to decide for yourself. Apparently, one Christmas morning, when I was about 4 years old, while everyone else was dreaming of sugar plums, I got out of bed, went out to the bright shiny Christmas tree that Dad had so neatly decked with bulbs, tinsels, and lights, saw all the packages under the tree, and proceeded to put them into my new wagon and one by one dumped them off the dock into the lake behind our house. The legend goes on to say that when everyone else in the family woke up that morning, they found me standing on the dock laughing and having a great time, watching the bobbing packages partially sunk beneath the thin ice of the lake, except, of course, for the heavier ones like bicycles, cranes, and other metal toys which managed to find their way through the ice to the muddy bottom at the end of our dock.
Oops!
I don't remember if this incident is true, but I'm sure of several things that would have occurred that day if it really did happen. First of all, my brother Terry would have beat me up, because he always took advantage of any reason he could to do that. And who would have blamed him on that Christmas morning? My oldest brother, Larry, would have stood by and watched, knowing that Terry was an equal opportunity sadist. Don't get me involved in this stuff. And that being the eldest would not spare him from any retribution that our brother Terry might think up for trying to help me. My father would have yelled a little, shook his head, and wondered what he had done in life to deserve all this. What in the world did I ever do to deserve these nutcakes? God help me. Before getting on with the task of recovering the gifts from the lake. Mom would have made excuses for what I had done, saying what a good, though obviously troubled boy I really was. He's a good boy. He just has a few problems. If my grandmother Knowles was there, she would have made a pot of tea and toast with marmalade. Okay, boys, what you need is a good cup of tea. And said that we should all sit down and relax, as it was only a few toys and some clothes. And wouldn't we be better served looking at her picture of Queen Elizabeth, which hung over her loom next to the pictures of Jesus and Winston Churchill? For her, that seemed to bring a sense of peace and purpose to all things. My brother Bruce, who would have been about 2 years old at the time, probably just cried and screamed. Because that's what babies do when they're 2, and people are carrying on like that. That information right there is enough to make a worthy case study for any ambitious psychologist. And I don't doubt that I may even get a letter from some well-meaning psychoanalyst who reads this book, explaining how this singular event triggered the life that was to come after. Nevertheless, legend or fact, the story has followed me throughout my life, and occasionally popped up when I or someone else was trying to figure out why I do the things I do. Somehow this tale never was believable to me until I was in my late 20s and I became a born-again Christian. While studying my newly discovered Bible one day, I was reading the book of Jeremiah and made a startling discovery. Here's what I read that day. Quote, "For the customs of the people are futile. For one cuts a tree from the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with the axe. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with nails and hammers so that it will not topple." Unquote. The passage then goes on to tell how they set this tree up and make an idol of it, even though they know it can't be a god, since they just cut it down themselves. To my new spiritually awakened brain, this was clearly a direct statement from God himself about Western Christmas traditions. Jeremiah was obviously having a vision of the future about Christmas tree idolatry. That was it for me. No more Christmas. My newfound faith had no place for such clearly heathen behavior. It was just another pagan holiday and had nothing to do with the real story of Christmas, Mary and Joseph, or even the three wise men. That philosophy really paid off a few years later when I got married to Jolyn. You see, she loves Christmas. In fact, if there's any day in the whole calendar that my wife looks forward to, it's Christmas. If she had her way, she would have at least 3 Christmases every year. She would start planning for the next Christmas on December 26th and go from Christmas to Christmas as though this was what was required of every good American wife and mother. She loves the whole idea of the tree, the tinsel, the turkey, the family gathering, wrapping and opening presents, and oh yes, being a good Baptist, Jesus is important too. So why would God arrange for her to meet and eventually marry the Grinch himself? And why would a righteous God, knowing that I was a faithful young zealot who had recently discovered the true idolatry of the Christmas tradition, not warn me of this potential road hazard in the highway of my life and ministry? Here I was ready to spend the rest of my days devoted to exposing the truth about this Christmas farce, and I ended up marrying an elf. Picture the typical Christmas season at our home. Starting in mid-November, Jolyn breaks out all of the boxes filled with hundreds of feet of shiny silver and gold-bristled garland, ribbons, candy canes, stockings, and little villages full of people, all smiling and laughing as though taunting the Grinch, who all the while sits in the corner observing this blatant paganism and grumbling under his breath over a cup of coffee, grumbling something like, "What's this got to do with Jesus?" or "Commercialism. I hate what the world has done to Christmas," which translated from the original Greek means, "Bah, humbug." She then places all these little decorations one by one around the house, including on the stairs leading to my office, so that I can't help but trip over them as I trudge faithfully upward toward my word processor.
Hey, what's all this stuff here, huh? What's going on?
On my righteous quest to churn out the next biblical declaration against such heathen practices. Next comes the massive Santa roller coaster, set up right on top of my grand piano and plugged in so that all the lights flash and the bells and whistles toot, and the little cars full of elves go up and down, rumbling toward their ultimate destination, delivering packages to all the children around the world. Round and round and round it goes, on into the night, 24 hours a day. Click, 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 as it climbs to the top of the hill, and then whoosh, as it races down the other side. All the little plastic cars with their little metal wheels racing along their little electrified tracks, haunting my sleep with visions of Jeremiah slashing at me with his sacred scrolls, as though hewing me in pieces with a jawbone for letting such things go on in my home. Click, 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 whoosh, click, 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 whoosh, like a Chinese water torture slowly dripping away at my mind, until I finally give in and confess my betrayal of everything good and wholesome and Christmas. Finally, there's the stuffed statues of Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus, standing 2 feet tall and blocking the inside entryway of the house, so that every time someone opens the door, out comes a hearty,
"Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!"
which immediately sets off the noise-triggered singing Christmas tree and starts the little elf carolers caroling, "We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas." On and on, endlessly, day after day, night after night, like an Alfred Hitchcock episode of Sesame Street. I have especially fond memories of one Christmas when we were living in Hong Kong. My mother-in-law in Florida worked for McDonald's. She was a trainer that went from store to store and helped them with their grand openings or other special events. These connections gave her the ability over the years to accumulate a massive number of little toys and plastic things like Barbie dolls, Hot Wheels, Polly Pockets, and a host of other Happy Meal toys, all collected over a period of about 14 years. Being the one who had taught my wife her Christmas ways, this particular Christmas she decided to send her daughter and her 4 little grandchildren, who were living far away in Hong Kong, about 200 or so of the latest McDonald's Christmas tree ornament. a little brown stuffed reindeer with a red nose and a tiny digital instrument sewn deep inside its body that played Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer every time you squeezed it just so. The trouble was that these little reindeer would go off randomly, without any notice, and start playing the Rudolph tune anytime they felt like it. Over and over, day and night from November on that year, I was forced to suffer this torture until I couldn't take it anymore. One night as I lay there in my bed, I could hear the little Rudolph toys going off all over the house. Like a whole family of demonic Christmas Chuckies sent to torment me for that morning long ago when I dared to take a stand against Christmas and all of the commercialism it really represented, as if they were screaming at the top of their little reindeer voices. It's payback time, Craig. I rose from my bed like a silent stalker in the night, went into my home office, grabbed my stainless steel letter opener, and began seeking them out wherever I could find them. Stabbing one here, crushing another underfoot as I worked my way through the house like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. I was going to kill Rudolph and any of his little buddies that tried to get in my way. From floor to floor and room to room I went, collecting them as I walked and stuffing them into a pillowcase like an evil Santa serial killer. When I finally reached the bottom of the stairs with my sack full of prisoners all chiming Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer on their little battery-driven speakers buried deep within their little reindeer bodies, I began stabbing them all with my letter opener while cackling loudly in some otherworldly voice. Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! Take that, you sick little reindeer! But all to no avail. Nothing would kill these beasts. I filled the sink with water and held them under one by one, slashing away with knife, fork, and letter opener, hour after hour while they bleated out faithfully, one after the other in different keys and on different tempos. I hated them, and I hated Gene Autry for writing that awful song. Soon my wife and kids came running down the stairs, only to find me in this state of total madness, killing all their little Christmas Rudolph dolls. But it was too late. I was out of reach, lost somewhere in the Christmas twilight zone. They spoke not a word as they watched in horror. Finally it stopped. When the last one was dead, I threw the sack filled with reindeer carcasses over my shoulder and stumbled down the cliffside pathway that led to a pier on the South China Sea. Like that day long ago, standing on my dock, staring into the black waters, I laughed almost uncontrollably. Then I went back up the hill, back to my bed, exhausted from my night of vicious butchery. I had won, but not without a great price. We didn't speak about it again that year. I've mellowed over time. I've skipped over that passage from Jeremiah many times since then, seeking rather to find a happy medium, and believe that God is more merciful than all that. After 4 kids and 8 grandchildren, I have found I have no choice. How could I not celebrate Christmas? Still, I wonder sometimes if that morning long ago wasn't a premonition of things to come. Some small warning that I might, if left to myself, become a little too legalistic for those around me. Maybe we all do that in some way, but when it comes to things like Christmas, all it takes is a few kids, some grandchildren, and a wife like Jolyn to help smooth out the rough edges. I don't go out on docks much these days, especially around Christmas time. I guess somewhere in the back of my mind I fear there's a little Christmas reindeer that somehow made it from the South China Sea to the pond in my backyard. And he's just waiting to get me, grab me by the neck and hold me underwater for all the bad things I did on Christmases past. Well, thanks for joining me for today's show. I hope you liked the story and that any of you Rudolph fans out there can find it in your heart to forgive me for my moment of Christmas cruelty as I took my frustrations out on Gene Autry's favorite little reindeer. If you like the podcast, please tell all your friends to go to my website at www.themulesriderchronicles.com. We can also be found on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, Facebook, iHeartRadio, and wherever you are listening to me right now. Thanks for listening today, and I hope you had a very Merry Christmas. Goodbye.